All right, family, how y'all doing? Desires Energy is back. Kids, we always say, don't smoke that. Y'all know the other word. So we have Miss Deborah Duncan here. She's a TV personality. She is a Emmy Award winner, several other awards that I have to list out later. But she's going to introduce herself to y'all. She is actually the host of Great Day Houston. And I had the blessing of meeting her years ago, actually, but also being a guest again on her show just last week. So is there anything you want to say to the audience, Miss?
I am so proud of you. Over the years, I've had the blessing of meeting thousands of people here in Houston, a lot of them having been children. And we had a guy on the other day who I kept talking to him, and he kept looking down. He couldn't talk to me. He's actually one of our clients on the show. And I said, "What's going on?" He goes, "I had a crush on you in middle school, and I came to your show. We were in the audience, and you autographed a picture for me." He goes, "I had your picture like above my bed." My mom was like, "I'm pretty sure it's inappropriate, but okay, I understand you like her, right?" So I just want to say how proud I am of you, and how it makes me feel that my purpose is to facilitate other people's stories, and those stories in turn help encourage others, right? So you, as a little third grader, had just written and published your book for the first time. I think you were an encouragement to somebody else out there who is listening. You never know all the people that you touch, but it's nice when they come circle back around. I'm like, look at you. I know
Let's
credit, but
But like I said, she helped us get exposure in the beginning, just like she did again last week. So it does come full circle. And speaking to inspiration, that is something that I wouldn't say that's my normal overall goal, but a nice accessory to what we're trying to do here with Desires Energy. So we know it's a lot of motivation out there, but a lot of people, they talk big, they read about big, but they don't necessarily act big. And with this podcast that we do, we want to basically break it down step by step so that way people have a real call to action in order to go after their dreams. Not, yeah, so they can do big.
But then you do big.
Exactly, because otherwise it's a lot of motivation, but if you don't have any knowledge, and more importantly, if you don't actually execute on what you're being shown and taught, then there will be no difference in your lifestyle. So going into the word inspiration, what inspired you to get into radio and media itself?
And I think, well, I had a cousin, because I always thought I was going to be a doctor. I love medicine, love science, love medicine. But I had a cousin who was working for CBS, the network at the time. And she said to me, she goes, the problem for your brain, you love everything. You love art, history, politics. You love people. Because if you go into a singular job like that, you'll get bored. And after you put that kind of commitment into it, do you really want to get bored? And I said, well, what are you talking about? She goes, well, what I do is journalism. She goes, every day you do something different and put it to bed and move on to something else. She said, just do it for a few years, take your MCAT, and then go off to medical school. Well, I never did get to the going off to medical school part because I kept getting jobs in this business. I kept growing in this business, and I kept loving this business. So she's the one that really encouraged me to actually go into it, along with a couple of teachers I had who said, use your personality, use your ability to influence. And I didn't understand what that meant, because to me, and you know this, you were a smart student. When you're a smart student, you think, okay, that's doctor, lawyer, engineer, stuff like that, yeah? And so I didn't really understand it. And I think today's generation, like you all, you had that whole world of the Bill Gates and the Michael Dells, Elon Musk, who opened it up and said, you don't have to be in a box like that. Mm-hmm. Do what you love, and the rest will follow. And if you believe in what you're doing, I love, that word energy for you. Mm-hmm. Energy always goes someplace, right? So whatever you're doing, as mundane as it may seem to somebody else, if you're doing it in good faith and with faith, I think that energy creates a ripple effect and creates something positive.
Definitely. And one new thing we say is no desire is achieved without energy behind it. And then the flip side as well, energy is pointless without a desire or direction guiding it.
See,
and
that's a faith. That's a fancy way, and the new kids' way of saying faith without works, right?
Yes, definitely, because you got to have both, And you were just kind of mentioning the guidance that you did receive growing up, or the advice you received, which allowed you to, if anything, get a feel for what you truly love to do. And so for personality-wise, give us kind of the rundown of who were you in high school? Like what kind of child were you?
Back to childhood because I didn't realize what I was doing until somebody pointed it out to me. So I went to 5 different elementary schools. My dad was in the military. My earliest memories of life were Taipei, Taiwan, living across the street from a Chinese village. And so because I moved so often, what I would do is when I'd meet somebody or get to a new school, it's like, hi, my name's Debbie. What's your name? What's your favorite color? Who's your best friend? What's your favorite toy? I would get to know some, yeah, I'm going to interview you right now and get to know you so we can be friends. And I would take people who were strangers, and by the end of the day we would be in the middle of a friendship, right? And the reason for that was I just wanted to make a connection before I had to move again. Little did I know, fast forward, the woman who actually pointed it out to me, I used to work at retail when I was in college, and I was in a store. There's a woman looking at a handbag. So normally what people do, they walk up and go, hi there, you looking for a handbag? Well, of course they are. They're looking at handbags, right? Instead of doing that, I would just kind of subconsciously look for a connection. And I remember this one woman, I looked at her and I said, did you spend time in Asia? And she looked at me and she goes, how did you know that? I said, well, you have the 22 karat gold emerald pagoda ring. My mom has the same one, and she got hers in Taiwan. And I go, did you? She goes, yeah. She goes, as a matter of fact. And so what happened was it took two strangers and made a connection. And what I have a tendency to do is that when I meet somebody, I always find something that connects our dots. And that's what I do in my living, right? It's as a talk show host, I see strangers all the time. There was a group of kids we had on that we were talking about an addiction among young people. And the producer came to me and said, those kids are not talking. They're just all staring at me. They won't say a word. So I went to the green room before the show, and I looked and I thought, okay, how am I going to connect? And I saw all the tattoos on kind of the leader of the pack. And I looked at him, I said, man, you were patient for a while. I said, this is all I was good for right here. I said, your life story is all right here, the good, bad, and the ugly, isn't it? And he goes, yes, ma'am. And we started going through some of the tattoos and sharing some stuff. And I literally looked at him and said, and this one right here covers up your tracks. This is the tracks of your tears, isn't it? Because I could see the pattern of his tattoo, and he goes, yeah. And so they felt immediately like I wasn't judgmental. I mean, here comes this woman who's like, oh, I'm a talk show host, right? I wasn't judgmental, that I had an understanding for them, but more so than that, I was facilitating a way for them to share their story.
Would you say that's your skill or your superpower? Because that's something that not a lot of people possess, that ability to find the commonalities in strangers, let alone individuals, and then also connect them with other people.
I would absolutely say that. Of course, when you do something that's kind of natural to you, you don't feel like it's a superpower. It's just who you are, and you think everybody does that. But I love to take, when you're looking at people who feel marginalized and they don't feel like anybody hears them or see them. That's what you do, is you go, no, I see you. Now you share from me because you're the expert, not me. You know, when I lived on the streets for 2 weeks as a part of a story on the homeless, and this is like way before you were born, but around mid-1980s, MHMRs across the country, mental health organizations kind of opened their doors and said, we can't afford it anymore. And we saw a big burst of homeless people in America. And my question was like, but who are they and how did they get here? And they had the will work for food. And I was like, is it really about that? And so I would go and I would sit with them and talk to them, and you start to realize the people with all the answers are not the people with the PhDs necessarily. They can probably execute some of those answers, but the smartest people out there were the ones who were on the streets, and it was crazy hearing the stories of how they got there. Everyone that I spoke to got there legitimately. Like, there wasn't somebody who just woke up and then one day said, oh, I'm going to live on the streets. You do have people like that who disconnect. There are, but
it was educated people. Like, it was all types of people that were ended up out.
It was people that if we had gone through the same thing, we may have ended up in the same position. There are people who, sex abuse, they were beaten, they were, all kinds of things had happened in their childhood where everywhere they turned, there was an adult who failed them. And when that is your life, and if what follows behind that is not just your heartache, but drug addiction, then you got a deeper hole to climb out of, right? And so, so you can see how people fell into certain places. And I just had a different view that when you drove down the street, sometimes I remember one woman saying to me, what bugged her the most was people who don't make eye contact. She goes, at least see me. You don't have to give me any money, just see me.
I've thought about it, but I've never actually really thought about deeply about how it affects people, even though they know that everyone is trying to, shun them or trying to avoid them, just the psychological effect it has knowing that people aren't even acknowledging you.
And sometimes I think it's because we don't want to acknowledge what could happen to us. I mean, I think all of us have thought at some point when we've seen somebody who's homeless, there by the grace of God, there go I, right? You look up and think, how do they, do I have the stamina to even do that? Could I even survive in a world like that? And so, it's tough. I'll tell you one quick story. When I first moved here to Houston, I was driving around. I lived in Westview, and I was driving around just to get a sense of the city. And there was a man who had needed money for food. And you see that all the time, but I felt something. I connected, and I thought, gosh, I can't shake it. And I went back to give him money. I had to go all through the traffic and, to another light. Had to go all the way back around. I went back around. I reached in my purse, and I thought I was pulling out a $10 bill. But I had just gone to the bank, so I had to buy some things, and what I pulled out instead was a $100 bill. And I thought, oh, no, I didn't mean to. I'm not giving him this. And then I had to ask myself, in my life right now, because that was a good time for me, in my life right now, am I really going to miss that $100 bill? There were days that I was 30 cents away from having a quarter. There were days I didn't know how I was going to feed myself, but this was not that time. This was the fruits of my labor. And I thought, I'm not going to miss that, and I gave it to him. Fast forward several years later, a church had come to our show to be part of our live studio audience. Yeah.
So you gave this man $100.
And I just, don't even thank me. You know how people always say, oh, don't give him that because you don't know what they're going to do with it. It wasn't my job to decide what he's going to do with it. I did what I was, exactly. Exactly, you get it. But what happened is after the show, a man came up and he said, hey, this church that was part of your live studio audience. I said, yeah. He goes, I'm the pastor. And I was like, oh, cool. And he goes, I met you when you first moved here. And I said, really? And he goes, yeah. He goes, I was standing on a street corner and I said, I gave you $100. And he said, yes. And he said, and on that day, I thought to myself, if a stranger can believe in me, why can't I believe in me? And he goes, I went to the Salvation Army, got my life straight, and turned my life over to the Lord, and then decided I was called to preach. So you never know. Like my mantra is kind of, if you let God use you, you don't have to figure out how. Like you don't have to have the rest of the story. Like I just know the rest of the story did something.
It's amazing. So all it takes is a gesture sometimes. With pure intentions to start an empire. And it's almost like the concept of a feather. All it takes is that last feather in order to collapse a roof. Yeah. Or so right. Same thing.
Broke the camel's back.
Exactly. Right? So that's an amazing story. A movie-worthy story as well, especially on that man's part. It's definitely a movie.
Hallmark movie channel near you, right? But no, and the part of that too that we all have to understand though is that he didn't just take $100 and go off and spend it on whatever. Yeah, he
had a desire. I think what it is that because I spoke to someone yesterday about this because the gentleman he asked me, do I believe that a desire can be given to you? And I told him, I said, I don't believe it can be given, but it can be inspired, but it's on the person to act on it. Right. So I can't give you passion. I can inspire you with my passion, but I can't give you your own passion. Right. And I think with this gentleman, the two things had to happen. The gesture that you did for him was inspiring to him, but he also had to have an innate realization and desire within himself to want to take the actions later, because otherwise he could have still been on that street 20 years later, or even not alive 20 years later, had he not had that inner desire to actually make a change himself.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's, it's like, this as an engineer, you have one action to get a reaction, right? And so that I just was like, okay, I get it now. He taught me a big lesson. I have a friend who, not to get religious, but I have a friend he's Jewish, but he's also a Buddhist. And I remember he goes, I'm Baptist. He goes, I'm a Jew-boo, right? And I go, okay. He goes, I'm going to turn you into a Baptist-boo. I go, what's a Baptist? He goes, you're Baptist and you can be Buddhist too. But he said, just listen to some of the principles. And I sat down with what they call a Rinpoche, kind of like it would be a priest in a Catholic church, right? Or a pastor. And I said, so tell me about the religion. He goes, first of all, it's not a religion, it's a way of life. And he said, you have to just understand that what is life? He goes, there are times that you are in a situation to teach a lesson. There are times you're in it to learn a lesson. And at times you get both. Mm-hmm. And so this man who in society would dismiss, he's just a homeless guy on the street, taught me a valuable lesson. And that was do with pure intentions without expecting a thank you, without expecting any accolades for it. Not like you're banking points for heaven.
So not expecting a thank you. So, and this is something for me. So I've always been the type that I don't mind doing anything for someone, but the moment I don't see gratitude, that always made me upset.
See, and I think
So I want to.
yeah, and I'll tell you where I do want some gratitude. If I let you in traffic, or I go out of my way to help you in traffic, you just give me a little. You cut me off in traffic, just give me a little, hey, I'm sorry I didn't have my blinker on, but just give me a little hand gesture. That's right, because we're all in that together. but for somebody who's been so beaten down, I don't expect them to have to do that, right? I don't look for rewards, but you're right. The one area I got to back up on, the traffic.
Gotcha.
Even if it's a quick.
Exactly.
Make a good point about gratitude, because it does encourage and let somebody else know that they're doing the right thing or they're on the right track, right? And that's, I think, helps to cement a kinder society when you acknowledge.
Very true. Going back to your ability to almost like understand people, even though you may have never been in their specific situation, is there something from your childhood, like besides the ability or the necessity of meeting so many new people and hearing so many different stories? Is there any personal experiences that allow you to put yourself almost in a stranger's shoes?
Absolutely. I was always the chubby, out of place little black girl, and I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. And so I would go in wanting people to like me, please like me. So I'd be funny, I'd tell jokes.
Like a people pleaser.
Oh, absolutely a people pleaser. And please like me, and I'd tell jokes. And I would when I was in 6th grade, I remember I went home and told my mom, I said, I don't like school. And she's like, but you're my happy child, you love school. I generally loved school, but I said, no, Mom, they make fun of me and they call me names and I just don't want to go back. And my mom said, why don't you start a Misfits club? And I was like, instead of, I love you the way you are, honey, why don't you start a Misfits club? I'm like, well, what's that? She goes, I'm sure there are other kids who feel the same way. Do you have somebody that you can get with? And I did, and we found a class sponsor, a club sponsor, and it was the Misfits Club, where people who didn't feel like they fit in, and that's okay, you come to our club.
It kind of reminded me of the, you ever heard of the Losers Club?
Exactly. But, and I was like, in that way, people will come in, we go like, well, I think you're great. I think you're great too. Your glasses are cool. Even though they're broken like that, those are cool, right? It's like, yeah, you're chubby, but guess what? In the wintertime, you're probably not as cold as the rest of us. So we would just make up stupid stuff, right? And we'd end up laughing to tears. But, I remember fast forward several years later, T.G. Jakes saying, how can you be a leader if you're too busy hanging with the pack? And it was funny. I just developed this sense for me is like, I can't worry about what people think anymore. As long as I think I'm doing the right thing, and please shake me and let me know when I'm not. But if I think I'm doing the right thing, I can't take on the frivolous stuff. I remember when I interviewed Oprah, I told her, I said, I loved watching you grow. And I said, in the beginning, I felt like if someone said they didn't like your outfit, you would start crying and never wear it again. She goes, yep. And then you got to a point where if someone said, I don't like that outfit, that you would cuss them out. And she goes, yeah, and take you around the corner, right? And then she finally got to the place where it's like, well, I didn't buy it for you. And the minute you're responsible for my wardrobe, we'll have a conversation. But I don't really care about what you just said. Right?
You know what's interesting? That actually, from what I've seen, is actually... it's really a matter of how at peace or happy a person is with themselves. Like a person that's very happy, insults don't bother them as much as a person that's already on the edge and waiting for someone to say something.
You told me I was fat, but when I was like 10% body fat with a 6-pack, you told me I was too skinny. So I can't help you. But the whole sense of self thing. And I remember in 7th grade, we had moved back to the States, and I opened up my Texas history book, and I saw a little square, about that big, just a little bitty square, about the size of a stamp, and it was a black woman. And I was like, what? I'd never seen that before. I'm like, because you all, I'm guessing, have had a lot more interactions with African Americans in history in school than I did.
Yeah, they did I would say...
besides being slaves.
Yeah, I would say they did a better job. College especially, you take African American history, so they do a better job. I would say, I don't know what the children are today learning, because I heard there's a lot of different, political things going on now. So they're trying to stop a lot of the history being learned. But I would say my generation, we definitely learned things better or more thorough than
It
maybe
was
the
like that.
generations
Because for
previously.
my parents, they went to segregated schools. They got all the African American history because those teachers made sure they understood, who they were made of and where they came from.
So your generation was right after the desegregation.
Yes.
And then when it,
Yes.
okay.
Yes. 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 And so, so I looked in the book, and I remember, and my parents never thought that we weren't getting the history, so they never really said anything. But I saw that little stamp, and it was Barbara Jordan. And I was like, oh my God, I want to meet this woman so badly. And then there was a seventh grade trip to Washington, D.C., and I was like, the stars have aligned. Thank you, Jesus. This is going to be amazing. And so I went home and asked my parents, and my mom said, we can't afford it. I think it was like $376. She goes, we can't afford it. And I was like, oh. So I
A trip, what, round trip?
round trip at the time. This is a long time ago. Don't chastise. This is back when gasoline was probably 5 cents a gallon. But no, but yeah, it was round trip and the hotel. Round trip and the hotel.
Okay.
Yeah.
So three, okay.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, my friend says to me, she goes, listen, write Barbara Jordan and tell her to tell your mom that you need to go.
She said, right, Barbara Jordan.
She said, "Write
You okay?
Yeah, yeah. So Congresswoman Jordan, and let her know that she needs to talk to your mom. I was like, yeah, it's a good idea, because we were kids, right? We're like, that's a good idea, because if the Congresswoman tells you need to do something, you better be doing it, right? So I wrote my little letter. And I checked the mailbox every day, and with all the naivety that there was no reason why she wouldn't respond. And then one day I pulled out that letter, and it was with the congressional, markings on it and stuff. And I was like, oh, it's Mar-. And it was, I opened it up. It's like, dear Miss Duncan, let education be your first concern. If you can get your daughter to Washington, D.C., I'll meet her class on the steps of Congress. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, Mom, and she's like, we'll figure it out. And they figured it out, and sure enough, she's like, where is Debbie Duncan? And I was like, oh, I'm here I am. And so,
I just realized, you telling this story, it makes me realize that when you just do instead of worrying about doing or overthinking, a lot can happen. And usually a lot will happen, because it's almost like you were too naive to know what you couldn't do.
exactly,
So therefore you did it, and you got the results from it.
exactly.
Because what you did, a lot of people in their 30s, at the time, 30s and 40s, weren't bold enough to do.
Well, and you lose that. We lose that as adults, right? It's like, did anybody ever win any contest who didn't enter? Nope. Right? Anybody ever win the lottery who said, that's odd. I don't know why I have a ticket with winning numbers. I've never played, or no one ever played, right? But yeah, so we lose that naivete, and there's no harm in just asking. You never know what'll happen.
True. That's going to be another clickbait right there. No harm in asking. I want to know, you mentioned Oprah. I was looking through your Instagram, and I was seeing all the different celebrity guests you've had over the years. Was there ever a point where you were actually starstruck, especially early on, but was there someone that you met where you were kind of in awe of the person, or was your superpower to relate to people and articulate yourself was so ingrained in you that you never got to that point where you just...
Yeah, that part. Yeah, it's interesting. People always ask me about that. I was never really, it's not starstruck as much as I feel a responsibility to do the best I can with the interview. There were times I've been like, okay, let me do the best I can with this interview. But yeah,
the respect you had for the...
yeah. And it's interesting because people say, oh, your favorite interview, you're this. It's never been the celebrities that were my favorite interview. And I think they would say the same thing. It was always a story that just touched you that you will never shake. And one of them was a little girl named Samantha who came on our show because she was dying. She's 5 years old. She needed a new heart. And her family came on to talk about the importance of, life gift and signing the donor card, because they're like, our daughter's probably not going to make it. And after that show, they left the show and they got a call that said, get in immediately. And they're like, what? We found a heart. Now, the thing that we knew is if they found a heart, it was a child's heart. But I also knew that there had been a car accident the day before, that we had covered that story, and a young boy was hanging on to life. That's whose heart it was. Now, fast forward, she got the heart. They came back on the show to talk about, that. And I had asked the mother of the boy who died whether she wanted to come on and meet this family. And she told us on the show, how dare you call? She was so upset with us. And I said, I get it. I have a brother who was killed by a drunk driver. Yeah, the mother of the boy who died. I said, I get it. My brother was killed by a drunk driver, and one of the first things we got was a phone call saying, hey, do you want to donate his organs? And it was like, ugh, right? But she had the grace to do that. But while I was interviewing this family, the mother showed up at the station anyway. And my producer got in my ear and said, she's here. What do you want us to do? Should we let her come on? And I was like, yeah, because whatever happens is going to be a real thing of what happens, right? So she came on the show. She was crying, and little 5-year-old Samantha put her hands on her face and said, thank you for what you did. And she goes, whenever you want to visit your son, she goes, just come tell me and I'll put your hand right here. And you can visit your son anytime. But thank you so much. So such wisdom from this little 5-year-old girl. And this is a story. We were all just in boohoo tears. Those are the stories that I remember. Celebrities they're usually hawking something, right? And I usually try to interview them beyond we all know that, but I try to get something else from them. Like, with Oprah, the very first time, she realized that the power of this medium we call television, and how powerful she is in it. Stories like that. What's the one thing you want that's not for sale? I usually try to ask those kind of questions because I want to get to know you. David Yurman, who is the most prolific American jeweler in the country, really like $500 million a year, when he was growing up, couldn't read. Dyslexic. People dismissed him, Dumb David, right? And, the Fonz, Henry Winkler, his parents used to nickname for him was Dumb Dog. And so you have these people who went through so much. And if you don't know that story, then it just, when you know that and then you see where they are, it just makes it so much more amazing.
Sorry, I get lost just listening to this. It's like it's a lot to really think about. And especially with the story you just told. And to me, I've never, done television, but I can kind of understand, especially from an emotional standpoint, how big it impacts people. And you being the professional host that you are, is actually amazing with segments like that, how you were able to probably keep it flowing as well. Because, you guys, with television people, you can't just stop 5-6 minutes and cry and think about what you're going to do next. It's like everything, a lot of it is live. So,
You're supposed to tell, you have like 5 minutes, 6 minutes, whatever, to get a story out, right? And I know there's a beginning, middle, and end. And so many times I know I could get so stuck in the middle, but I got to go, but it has a happy ending. Hold on. Right? We got to get to the ending, and there are a couple of times in shows where we have gone there and I was like, there's no way we're going to get through this whole thing. There's no way. And I'll look at my producer, they'll give me the time and I'll be like, you figure it out. You figure out how to time the show. Somebody else might need to get taped later. We might need to drop another story, but we're going to go another segment with this person. So, and they all get it. They all have the look. It's like right? So.
Yeah, like I said, I know especially she has a great team that works behind the scenes, and I know they probably be pulling their hair out trying to figure out, get these times right.
They'll be like, oh man, this is good. This is good. Yeah, this is good. Watch your face because it's coming.
And that actually leads me to my next question. What are the 5 traits, and I say 5, but it may be 3, maybe 7. What are the traits that you believe are necessary to do what you do? Be a TV personality, especially when it comes to live television.
Guess who it's not about? I can't tell you how many times I've been to I've interviewed girls in a pageant, and I'm just one in particular. She had down there, I want to be a talk show host and a news anchor. And so I said, well, why do you want to be those things? Because what was missing from there was journalist, right? She goes, I don't know. I just like to talk. My family says I like to talk. I can talk all the time. Talk. And I'm like, okay, but who wants to hear you? Yeah. It's like, what do you have to talk about, right? So it's, I was like, okay, so you have to listen. Number one, know that it's not about you. Number 2, you're there to facilitate someone else's story. As I said earlier, you're a mediator between their thoughts and where you're trying to go in that segment. You have to listen, because if you don't listen, you'll miss things. That's why I don't have questions on my card. I have answers. And the example I give is, let's say, you're interviewing a famous, I think I told you this the other day, you're interviewing a famous chef and you're like, okay, so why do you like to cook? Well, Mindy, when I was 5 years old, I murdered my entire family. And by 6 p.m., I was hungry.
And so what kind of recipe should I use?
Right. Well, after I murdered the entire family, I decided to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Right. But so people, they skip right over what somebody's like, whoa, somebody just said something there. It may take you to a whole nother conversation that you didn't intend on having, but sometimes that can be better. Or sometimes you learn something that you didn't know about that person. I had a person who he slipped out of his mouth that he had left acting for a while to make his amends. And when he said amends, I worked in the recovery world, so I know making your amends means you are in recovery, meaning you have recovered from some type of addiction, right? And so that took us to a whole other place we had no idea. And he was able to just really open up and share some things that we were like, wow. So it was super cool.
So it sounds like the second or the third would be adaptability.
Absolutely adaptability, because it's not your story. You don't know everything. I go in there knowing some stuff about people, but you gotta when you say adaptability, we also talked about one of the assignments I gave students when I was teaching at the University of St. Thomas, and it was they had to interview me. Like there were so many different ways they could go. I had a brain aneurysm that burst several years ago. You could go with being faced with a life-threatening.
Wait, hold up. Wait, I'm sorry. See, no, no. Nah, because like I said, this is an obstacle, obviously. So you had a brain aneurysm. So can you tell me what was going on at that time? What were you like? Obviously, you were highly stressed.
Well, I mean, those can happen. You can just have a weak spot in your vessel. It doesn't. There was stress. I mean, I will say that. But I had just moved from Dallas to New York City, and I was actually finishing a job in Dallas and flying to New York City and taping a show and flying back to Dallas and doing a show. So I was kind of like Tom Joyner, the fly jock. I was like doing this in two different cities.
That was Good Morning Texas, right?
Yes, that was Good Morning Texas, and then went off to go work for a show in New York for Lifetime. And I woke up that morning and I was just like, God, thank you so much. You have given me so much more than I ever would give myself. And my head exploded at that moment, and I thought it was the craziest amount of pain that I've ever felt in my life. And
So it didn't feel like a regular headache or nothing.
no, and it came out of nowhere. Like the best way for me to explain it, although I don't know what that feels like, is if someone just walked up to you with the axe and just slammed it in your head. And it was, I mean, it's almost like I just remember my tongue was paralyzed. I was like, oh, right. And I had pins and needles and numbness on another side, and then dizziness. And then I was just looking, I was like, what just happened? And because of my kind of interested in pre-med stuff in the past, I'm like, clearly there's liquid between that sheath that goes over the brain and the brain. That's what's causing the pain. But where's that? Why is that liquid happening? Is that a stroke? Is that I was like 35? Is that a stroke? Is that I was by myself in the hotel room in New York City, and I was getting dressed and getting ready to go to work. And so I thought, if this is an aneurysm or whatever, I thought I'm dying. And I thought, what do I do? Right. So I went downstairs to the driver I had because I knew the first person on the show was a doctor. And I'm like, I can't go to the emergency room because I'll fall out and they'll be like, oh, move her out of the way. Because I had nobody with me. So I told the doctor, and the doctor was like, yeah, I probably have a migraine. I'm like, no offense, but I've never had a migraine before. And then I just sucked it up and thought to myself, I can't put 60 people out of work. I'm looking at all these people on the show floor, and I ended up collapsing, and it didn't work, and I ended up in the hospital. And
So, but what's amazing is you had a brain aneurysm while you were at the hotel, and you actually managed to go all the way downstairs.
Yeah, it was in a good place for me because, as you probably know, most people don't survive brain aneurysms at birth. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, my brain bleed was in the right place, and just enough liquid was coming out to let me know I was in trouble.
And did they ever, when they after they diagnosed the situation, did they ever give any cause for what caused it, or was it?
I didn't really know. Like sometimes it's congenital. Sometimes you can be born with just that weaker spot in the vein, and then after blood goes. Have you ever seen like a hose where it starts to bubble a little bit? On a water hose, yeah. Okay, yeah, okay, yeah. So you'll see, and it starts to bubble a little bit, and finally it can just burst. So it can be that. Sometimes certain medications can cause it, but I wasn't really on anything, so that was it. So
to me, it's a scary truth, but just wondering what could have possibly, because again, it could be genetic, but even then, what caused it at that exact time? Because I'm sure we probably when you're early 30s.
There was extra, there was definitely extra stress going on at the time. That's a whole nother story. But yeah, so it burst, and then the crazy thing was I got to hear what people would say without going or actually having a funeral, because people the viewers of they put it on the news in Austin, the news in Dallas, viewers went nuts, and it became like it was Ross Perot. It was Governor Bush at the time, and then President Bush, and then you had all these people were jumping in. All these celebrities were jumping. The Dallas Cowboys, and I was like, what's happening? And oh yeah, people were showing up in New York. They were coming to the hospital, and they're like, this one couple. Hi, Deborah. My name's Esther. This is my husband Simon. My daughter works in Dallas and says I'm Ma. Get up there. I don't know if she knows anybody. Go to the hospital and bring her something. Bring her some of your schnoodle, or not schnoodle, koodle. It's a dessert, right? And so it was Kugel. I think it's Kugel. Yeah, it was interesting. People would just show up with stuff, and they're like, "We're here to take care of you." And it was the strangest thing, and at the same time, it was the culmination of what you talked about earlier, when you just do things for people, wanting to do good by somebody, and then all of a sudden, it all came rushing back. And it was through the doctors, through the airline that got me home on a plane by myself to Dallas to recuperate. It was everything. People were sending things, sending prayers. Churches were calling, and it was over Easter. I was in the hospital over Easter, and all these churches from Dallas would call, and they'd patch it through my room, and they'd go, "We're praying for you right now." And so it was amazing, because I had thought my job was, I love my job, I love it, but in the list as jobs like firefighter, doctor, teacher, and all that stuff, I thought talk show host, I'm down here, right? Or even news anchor, I'm down here. We have a job to do, it's an important job, but I didn't put it in the hero category at all.
It goes really by how many lives you affect. So it doesn't matter how small the job or how unnecessity the job may appear. If you've affected millions of people, you've affected millions of people. Yeah. Whether it's through your singing, through your acting, through your reporting, being a talk show host, what you speak about, because evidently the most powerful tool we have is the tongue, our speech, what we say. 1,000%. Empires can be built or destroyed based on what you say, how you influence other people.
One woman who wrote a letter and said, "Thanks for saving my life." Now, if somebody said, "Thanks for saving my life," you probably think, when did I throw myself in front of a city bus? And right? And so I was like, So I kept reading, and she said that her husband had left for work that day, and she pulled out a gun from the nightstand and was trying to decide head or heart, head or heart, head or heart. And while she was trying to make that decision, she heard laughter in the living room, and she went in because it piqued her curiosity. And there was a show that I was doing, a segment I did where I tried out for the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders. And it was, now why are you laughing? Back in the day, right? No. So, but it was funny. We made it. It was a joke. I had a tutu on. I was ridiculous when I was there, and we didn't let the women know that I was working with the organization, working through like how the process works and stuff. And we had a microphone in the bathroom, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, did you see that girl out there in the tutu? Oh, how sad!" But they put my name up there like I made it, and they were horrified. They were like, "How did she make it? And I did not. Look at her in her tutu." And so we had such a good time with that. But the woman said she started laughing, and in her depression, she realized, if I'm laughing, I'm still alive. If I'm still alive, I can do something about my situation. And even if I feel horrible and in my depression, it's a feeling. And if you're having a feeling, you're alive. And if you're alive, you have the power to do something about your situation. So she had been dealing with depression. And that was the morning she said she had had enough. But then she flipped open a book. She goes, "I found help, went to a psychiatrist, got the right medication and therapy." And she goes, "And so thank you for saving my life."
Oh, that is amazing. And
let God do it. You don't have to know how, right?
Definitely. No, that's like I said. This is all good gems for the people, the audience especially. And I feel like
if you let God use you, you don't have to figure out how. Is what I meant. Yeah.
Facts. I feel like people, when they watch this podcast itself, just the stories that you gave about previous examples of people being helped, I feel like this will help someone. Because what I've learned is that a lot of people, they feel alone. No matter how many times, even though the problem they have, millions of people have had it throughout history, everyone feels like their problem is they're suffering by themselves. So when they hear these stories, especially testimonies of people that have just contacted you, telling you their stories and how you helped them or helped save and impacted their lives, that alone will also get through to the viewers at home or the audience watching, because some of them are going through those same exact situations right now.
I just say, one of the best things you can do when you feel alone or you feel worthless or you feel depression, any of those things, obviously with certain levels of depression, seek professional help, right? But go volunteer someplace and help somebody. The feeling you get when you sit on a floor with somebody who feels worthless or somebody who's going through some stuff, it is amazing. Like, we see the way this city responds whenever there's a disaster. I remember after Katrina, a friend of mine called, and if you look from the outside looking in at this group of friends, this particular group of friends I have, they should not have a worry in the world. I mean, everything's just, oh my gosh, my life's just perfect. I got 3.2 kids and a great dog, and my house is so big that sometimes there's parts of it I just never see. And right, they got everything, right? And it's like you think they have everything, and then you realize how much the things don't matter. But one of my friends called me one day, and she goes, "I am so hurt for all those people." She goes, "I want to help." She goes, "But I can't do anything." She said, these are her words. She goes, "But I can't do anything. I'm just a housewife." And I said, "No, you're not just a housewife. You can figure it out." And so the next call I got from her, she was in her bathroom, and she looked up at her, like there's a shelving thing that she has with all these fingernail polishes, and she just shoved all the polishes into a bag, called her other friends and said, "Let's go down to the Astrodome and let's just polish fingers and toes." And that's what they did. They polished fingers and toes, and it wasn't about somebody who's in that desperate need getting their toes polished or nails polished. It was a human connection. It was somebody who said, "I see you, you're not alone, and I'm not afraid to touch you and be with you and be in your space."
That is very impactful. That's good advice for anyone who is interested, who has that heart that want to help but feel as though they have nothing to offer. Sometimes service alone goes a long way. So whether it's handing out water bottles, whether it's even that, we've actually done it ourselves. We're not, we know we're not rich yet, but as a brand, we
Rich in other things.
and I shout out to CJ, our COO, the 17-year-old that was on the show. He the one that had to convince me to go down with him to deliver and give out pizzas and water to the homeless a few weeks ago. So, and again, like I said, it wasn't my idea. It was his, and he had to keep bugging me about it. And I finally said, because, in my mind, it's like, hey, man, we need all the money we can get right now. And he was like, bro, look, just bless other people, man. It's going to come back to us. Just bless other people. So, I'm glad we actually did that. And that's something we definitely want to start making a more reoccurring theme. And what you were just saying reminded me, I'm sure you've heard this quote before where it said, "I used to complain about not having shoes until I met a man with no feet."
Yes.
So that's what kind of seems like it's a similar concept where everyone, no matter how rich they are, no matter how good their life may seem from a physical standpoint, having that mental hurdles or having those problems mentally, you still won't be happy. No amount of money can cure depression. It's a mental game.
And then having the moment where I was laying in a hospital bed, not sure if I was going to make it, you start to reevaluate some things as well. It's like, like what truly matters. And then also just, I remember when I first started my career, I did not make any money. I was anchoring the morning news, but I bought a car that cost more than I should have paid for, and it didn't work. I bought a brand new car that didn't work. This is before lemon laws, and then the company that made this car pulled out of the country, and so my warranty wasn't even. So I was paying for a car that didn't work and walking to work, and I had to get another job. I was cleaning apartments to get them ready for rent, and then I would go do that and then get dressed and go in and anchor the morning news. And I was working in Austin. So it's like.
So you weren't, because this is actually going back kind of similar to, because I don't think we ever got to really finish the question about the different traits that a person needs. Because what I want to do, resilience. Because what I want to do is I want to become you. So I'm 16 years old. Yeah. I'm a young lady, or a young man for that matter. Yeah. I want to be in the same seat as Miss Deborah Duncan in the future.
Yeah. Become the best version of you, right? Don't become me. You can learn from me and anybody else. You can always take lessons from all of us. But I always, and when you use the word become, which is a little bit different, but people sometimes will come up to me and say, "I'm going to replace you." And I'm like, "But you don't, we don't replace anybody, right? None of us replace each other. And why would you want to? I said, don't you want to do something?
That's a weirdly arrogant statement. It's almost like fighting words. Like, what? You want to replace?
Yeah, I'm like, okay. And I'm like looking at you going, I would try to do better. Don't replace me. Just do better than me. It's as I mentioned earlier, life is about, when you live life, it's you're learning lessons or teaching lessons. It's like, what do you learn? And what you learn, everybody's learning lessons. Everybody's lessons are different. You put them all together, and you get that unique you that makes you the best person that you can be, right? So it's like, and instead of becoming me, become you with all of your unique lessons put together. Yeah, the best version of you, and that best version of you continues to change and grow. I've just now gotten into the position where I feel comfortable with myself. Like, if it's gonna be fat Deborah, okay. It's gonna be skinny Deborah, okay. If it's gonna be whatever Deborah, I'm comfortable with that. People oftentimes ask me, do you get nervous before you go on the air? I used to get really nervous, but now I realize that being nervous is about a couple of things. One is, are you prepared? If you're not prepared, you're nervous.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Preparation means a whole lot.
And then beyond that, it's just like, if something happens that's human, it's just human. I can't out-human myself. No one should be expected to out-human themselves. Mm-hmm. So it's like, whatever happens is, I'm gonna go back to what my son used to say when he was little. He was in the back seat of the car one day. And this is one of those days where everything was like, misplaced keys and did this and running late. And I was just all this, and I just, put him in the car seat and stuff. And I was like, ah. And he goes, what's wrong, Mommy? I said, it's just like a crazy day. And he goes, oh. And so we're driving, it's silent. And all of a sudden I hear him go, is anybody going to die? And I went, what was that? He goes, is anybody going to die? I go, well, no one's going to die. He goes, then it's okay. And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, perspective. He's like, okay, everything's workable, right? So, yeah, it's just just be open to things. But I'm just now comfortable with myself enough to be like, is what it is.
So we're gonna say step one, because I want to make these concrete, make them concrete for the audience. Step one is not about you. Step two was somewhat of being adaptable, being able to adapt to the conversation, the situation.
You had in your mind and you thought was going to happen, most likely is not going to happen all the time. Yeah, you can't plan stuff. And, I use that in my life. Of people always say, what are your goals? And I said, I kind of stopped setting goals, because early on in my career, whatever goal I set fell way short than what God gave me. And sometimes people set goals so stringently, that you're like going, it's like, hey, I'm on my way to the store. Okay, there's a bag over there with $1 billion in it with your name on it. Yeah, but that's not my plan today. My plan is to go to the store. Okay, well, there is a bag that's got your name on it with $1 billion. And it's going to be so sometimes. So be adaptable. Absolutely be adaptable. When I said earlier, it's not always about you. Ask yourself every day, what can I do that can impact somebody else in a positive way? It can be a little thing like letting somebody in traffic, as long as y'all. Right? Or
I think for that, what y'all probably should do, which I'm gonna start probably doing, is get like a little whiteboard so you can write "I'm sorry" when you cut somebody off. Just put it out the window, "I'm sorry," so that'll make them feel better.
You're the engineer. I was wanting a thing where in cars where you can push a button that one would say like "back off" on your tail light, back off, or say other things, or like give me a wave. Yeah, but yeah. So yeah. Definitely, the being adapted. It's not about you. Being adaptable, asking yourself every day with intention when you step out the door, what can I do to make the world a better place? It can be a little thing or a big thing, but what did I do today that left a mark? What did I do today that somebody may mention? And sometimes they're not good things, and you got to learn from that too. I've gotten impatient in situations and acted a fool. My son's like, "That's not my mother," right? But it's like, okay, what did I do that left either a bad mark or a good mark? And hopefully I'll leave more good marks, right? Let's see what other things would go by. Sometimes it's just a smile for somebody in the mall. There are times I've said to somebody, "I love your outfit," when I didn't even see the outfit really. I just felt like they needed somebody to acknowledge them. Yeah.
So let's go into hard skills, because those, like I said, these are more intuitive and soft skills. But let's say hard skills, something that you put on a resume. What would you advocate this young lady or this young man? Almost like, and again, obviously, none of this is verbatim. Everyone has a different journey. But if you were to say, what major should this youth choose in college? Or should they go to college? Or what type of jobs and internships should they be applying to?
And an internship is everything. An internship puts you into the space of where you'd like to be with people who can be role models for you, but also people who, if you're a good intern, feel responsible for you. And I'll go back to like, there's the academic part of what we learn, and do look at it and say, do I need to go to college for this particular thing? Understand that whatever job you're applying for is the first thing the person that you're applying with going to do is say, what's the level of education? It's not that education is everything. It's just that it proves different things to an employer, right? Sometimes they're like, they just want to see you had the commitment. For some of our sciences, they need to know that you know the science, right? Mine's not so much about the science. Because literally when I got my internship, they asked me to go do one thing and I came back with 10. They asked me to go get a soundbite from the governor's aide, and I'll share this story. So they missed the press conference with the governor, and they said, we need you to go to the legislature, go to the Capitol, and get a soundbite from the governor's aide on this particular bill. And I was like, okay. I had no idea what I was doing. If you've ever been to the legislature during session, it's Looney Tunes.
It sounds like they had you doing something political, huh?
Well, the legislature was in town. I was covering news. I was at the time. I anchored news for years before I got in a talk show. So, but my first job in radio, I was a news reporter, and so I had to go cover this bill that was part of the news. And I went there to the governor's office, and I walked in. They're like, "Can we help you?" And I was like, "Yes, I need to get a soundbite from the governor's aide." I was so scared, and they're looking at me like, "Poor thing." They go, "He's not here." So one of the other lessons is be prepared, again, but it's about being adaptable. Be prepared. Be prepared and be adaptable. So I was like, I wasn't prepared for he wasn't here. I was like, well, where is he? I'll go to him. And they're like, well, he's busy. He's off site and he's busy. And so, you can't go see him. He's busy. I was like, but I wasn't prepared, and I thought, I can't go back to the station and say he wasn't here. Now, how many people will go back to the station and go, well, the governor's aide wasn't there? So instead, I was begging. I wasn't too proud to beg.
So you didn't. It's almost like you didn't know that it was okay to not come back with what you were supposed to come back with.
Well, it wasn't okay for me. That was my work ethic. It wasn't okay for me to come back empty-handed. I sat there and I was like, but please. And then all of a sudden this man sticks his head out and he goes, you can talk to me. And I was like, I'm sorry, Governor, but they told me to talk to your aide. And he's like, I'm pretty sure if you talk to the governor of the great state of Texas, they won't be upset with you. And it's kind of funny when you come out when you're in grade school, what do you do? And when you're a good student, what do? You follow directions. Yeah, some people make the directions. Good students usually work for the people who make the directions, right? So I was like, okay. So I come back with this interview with the governor, and they're like, how did you get that? I go, well, he came out and insisted that he talked to me. So, and then another one was, there's a thing that's called Farm Aid during the mid-'80s, and Farm Aid was when they were raising money to help the farmers, and Willie Nelson was a big part of it and stuff. They did these concerts, and it helped our farmers who were going through a hard time. So they were like, okay, go interview the organizers of Farm Aid. And I thought to myself, why am I going to interview the organizers behind the scenes? I want to talk to Willie Nelson. Mm-hmm. So I called him. He goes, all right, well, my house is out past Dripping Springs and Johnson City and whatever it was. And I was like, okay. And I drove to his house and interviewed him, and then came back with this whole thing. They were, well, we're going to make a whole Sunday morning program out of this. So what ended up happening is I started my internship. 2 weeks later, they hired me full time.
So Just Ask I feel like that's going to be the concept of this podcast itself, is Just Ask.
Just ask is one, but also do better than what you've been. But make sure, you can over deliver without wasting resources. So people have expectations of you. I get this all the time. How did you make it as a black person? It was like, well, sometimes when people have stereotypes, and I know some people are going to really take me to task on this, but there are a lot of people who are like, no, stereotypes not acceptable in any way. And I'm like, but they exist because humans are humans. So instead of acting like they don't exist, I lean into them sometimes. And if I'm working with somebody who didn't expect much out of a black woman, I over-delivered, because I could have just delivered, and they would have been like, she went and got the interview we told her to get. But it was over-delivered, and they were like, wow, okay. So, and I came from a generation of parents who would always say, you got to do better. You got to do better, right? But I would do that, and part of it wasn't over-delivering to get any response from it, but I was curious. My thought was, I want to talk to Willie Nelson. I want to talk to so and so. I would do that.
So what was snuck into what she just said, her statement was there was a passion that was there or a desire that was there that didn't come from whoever was telling her to do it. It's like if you're in school and someone says, "Hey, I want you guys to read this book." If you was already reading the book anyways, or if you was already enjoying the book anyways, then you're able to go the extra mile on writing the paper or whatever assignment you're given because you have a desire, innate desire, in order to go above and beyond. Plus, out of another perfect word she mentioned was curiosity. When you're curious, and I think probably scientists probably are the best example of this. Their curiosity is what allows them to discover things. Because to test out something thousands of times, all these different hypotheses, all these different experiments, at some point you have to be curious in order to keep going. Because if it's just
ask the question too, right? To begin with, yeah. So I always love when, like, what kind of student are you when you take a test? Do you take a test and then you check your score and then keep on moving, or do you take the test, check the score, and say, now which ones did I get wrong? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
now that's the mark of I would say a genius or any type of scientist in a sense, mentally. Because my brother, shout out to him, he's actually that type person through school, and he's very successful now. But through school, he would, if he get a 95, he would be studying that one question that he got wrong, and he would almost to a fault, especially in college, because everything's faster paced. Right. He would spend so much time not only understanding the work, but he would be trying to understand the question itself and like the breakdown of, for instance, let's say in school you're taught, okay, use this equation to solve this type problem. My brother, and I know people like him, their job, they didn't want to just learn how to solve the problem. They wanted to figure out how was the equation derived in the first place. Right. They almost want to go back to like Isaac Newton's mind and say, okay, why did you say that a squared plus b squared equals c squared? Like, I don't want to know it just so I can use it. I want to know, why did you come up with this in the beginning? Like, where did you get this from?
Or to even challenge the answer, right? You get your Michael Dells and your Bill Gates who are like, hey, I know what you're saying, but what if we did? Well, we don't do it that way. Okay, but I'm just saying, what if we did, not that it happened exactly like this, but they're like, you know what? I think I know a way where this can really work, so I'll check you later. And they dropped out. And they went and did their thing and created something new. Like, your brother is as motivated as this mosquito that's flying around, right? Yeah. This mosquito has this goal. He's like, I got a goal, and they keep trying to.
It has a desire, and his energy is correlating with it.
Yeah. So it's questioning why you got something wrong, and then the person who goes the extra mile questions why their answer could not be right. Could it be right?
True. That's the mark of a genius. Like I said, and that's and also like I said, it's about what you mentioned earlier about standing out. You can't be with the pack, or you can't stay with the pack and become a leader. More importantly, you can't innovate if you're copying what's already being done. Mm-hmm. And the only way, usually things when they're new, they're always going to be ostracized to some extent, or there's going to be a lot of combativeness or a lot of pushback on something new. Like even with cell phones, right? When cell phones first came out, I'm sure it was a lot of people that would say, what's the point of having this in my pocket? I got a telephone at home. I got a house phone. I got a beeper. What's the point of?
I mean, it was like, they're like, you're going to scare the cows. You are the cows.
We have horses.
What do we need a car for? And I always have this fantasy in my head. I'd love to be able to go back in time and pluck out those first people who are starting to build, to do cars and go, look at it now. And then Alexander Graham Bell. And look, I can talk to people in my car. If I could, like when the world comes to an end and we all go to heaven or wherever we go, I'll be like, Mr. God, I just have this one thing I want to do. I want to take inventors from the past and then put them into what they started and let them see where it's come to, right?
That'll be very funny. Of course, go back too far. So we still, what I'm saying, we don't want to.
There's a wheel. Yeah. Trust me. There's this thing called a wheel, right?
We still got certain things, certain barriers going on. But like I said, and it's actually interesting. I do want to point that out where you talked about people with the victim mentality. Because you didn't use that word, but that's what I've heard, and that's what I've seen a lot, where a lot of people look at the stereotypes or the situations that minorities are in around the world, let alone in America, and they try to use that as an excuse at every turn that they can as to why they can't achieve something or why they haven't achieved. It's more so an excuse on what they lack, as opposed to, no matter how true it is, using it as motivation to push harder.
We project, right? It to be responsible for yourself is big. That's a big thing. But I think with most of us, at some point in your life, there are times that I get when the world is against you. It's hard for you to think out of what you're in, right? But at some point in your life, I remember talking to some kids who were in a really bad situation when I was working in Dallas at the school that they were in. Like, several of the kids of the elementary school would come to school in the morning for the free breakfast and then leave and go sell drugs and then go back for the free lunch, because the dealers knew that if they got arrested, their kids, they would just go down to juvie for a minute and be sent back home. But I said to them, I said, who do you think the most powerful person in your life is? And this one kid goes, our parents. And I go, nope, not your parents. And it's like, oh, Jesus. And I go, not even Jesus is so presumptive that he's like, you're just going to do what I tell you because I tell you. You have to make the choice to believe in him, right? You have free will. And so I said, you're the most powerful person in your life. Now, outside pressures are one thing, but whatever situation you're in, you are the most powerful in getting out. The hard part is figuring out how to do that, or freeing your mind from those chains. One of the things I find so important is that so many African American children do not, we were talking about Black history earlier, don't know their history. And one of the things I did was I did my DNA. My dad's grandparents were a family of 8 sold into slavery in 1863 for $100 a piece. And I saw that on the document. And when I see that, I'm like,
It was sold for how much?
$100 a piece, 1863. And so when you see that, you're like, that's my dad's grandparents. That wasn't a kabillion years ago. All right, so that's not that long ago.
That was enough for you to accidentally buy them.
Yeah.
Like you gave to the man.
Exactly. And so when I see that, then that sense of responsibility is, and let me make this very clear. I did not grow up in the hardship that a lot of people have grown up. But I can't help but think, if you just know that somebody else was out there going through the worst of it, thinking I'm going to hold on for my kids and hope that their life is better. And they're going to hold on for their kids and hope that their life is better. People went through some stuff.
To be fair, in order to defend you and your story, let's put this into context, because like, I can't speak for the older generation, but for the younger generation, the kids that are on welfare today are considered poor. Unless you just really on the street, like sleeping on a corner, you actually have it better than the average person did 50 years ago, 45 years ago. So around the world, even today, around the world, other countries, the people here today that are considered poor, that aren't like literally on the street corner, they're living better. When you factor in food stamps, welfare, all these programs, government assistance, and then kids going to college, they have it better today than people around the world. Like, the poor people in our country are living in like the top 10% of how people live around the world in some of these third world countries. So anybody that's, I would say, probably especially under 30, but probably 30, 35 years old, everything you complain about outside of very traumatic experiences, obviously, but when abuse and addiction, things like that, is timeless regardless of what your circumstances is. But other than that, just from a lifestyle perspective, you living in that little shotgun house with your cell phone and air conditioner and your indoor, like, for instance, my dad, when he was young, they had an outhouse. They didn't have indoor plumbing.
My mom and dad, they were much older than when they had us, and I'm older, right? So, but my mom and dad, they had a house where she swept the floors because they had to keep their house neat. Their mother demanded that. My grandma demanded that. They were sweeping dirt floors. They picked cotton. That's what they did. They were
sharecroppers.
Yeah, they were in the one room schoolhouse, all that stuff, and they went through some of the brunt of discrimination and the whole bit. And my grandmother, my great grandparents for sure. Like I mentioned, my dad's grandparents were sold into slavery, right? So it's.
I bring that up about what you said, your generation, is because, to give it context, because a lot of people, because just the way you tried to explain that, oh, well, I know I haven't been through haven't had the worst childhood or the worst background, it's not a victim Olympics. You don't win an award because you try to get everybody to feel sorry for your situation. Because like I said, I've come from two great parents, and I'm not going to ever disrespect them, and I don't think people should disrespect their parents by talking about how terrible, outside of truth, which is more so about abuse and addiction, people try to have like a victim Olympics where they try to say, oh, well, I had to get it out of this, and I had to do this, I had to do that. The whole time their parents are turning over in their graves thinking like, boy, I worked 3 jobs to put your little narrow behind through school, and you sitting here talking about how you didn't have nothing to eat and how you had to go sell drugs. Now you did that because you wanted to, but that's another story. But the whole point is that struggles, your struggle, use your struggle as motivation. Don't use it as an excuse.
There's a man I interviewed a few years ago. And he's with a really cool group, and what they do is they take people out of prison and say, okay, let's try to figure out how to put them on a path that's that God intended him to be on. So this one guy, he was the drug dealer. He had a meth lab. He had all that stuff, and he's like, how you gonna do a resume for that? And we're like, well, you'll work 24/7. Your work ethic's amazing. You work with any kind of people. You'll get it done. It doesn't matter if the weather's bad. You're out there working, right? There's nothing that's going to stop you from getting to work. And he's like, that's true. That's true. 24/7, people will be calling. Now take that skill set. Let's move it over here to like a different job. And he's like in mid-management at one of our big corporations here. And he's like that the best moment of his life was when the police bust through the door and put him in handcuffs. He said that was the best moment of his life.
It's actually true, because most people wonder about hard work. It's what you work on that's just as impactful, or I would say more impactful, because going back similar to what we were just talking about, slaves worked harder than all of us, but the situation, the circumstance, what they were working on didn't necessarily lead to the success and prosperity that people are hoping for. So it's not working hard alone is not enough. You have to be working towards something of substance. Because like I say, you can take a hammer and pound a car all day, but if you don't have a plan, a vision, and more importantly, like you said, the work to put behind that plan and vision that's in the right direction, and then be adaptable, like we talked about, and then understanding to build something large and great is not about just you. It's about how you affect, impact, and influence the people around you. All of these things are what makes the difference between working yourself into the ground for nothing and actually seeing results, or I would say magnificent results for what you're putting your efforts towards.
And being realistic. Look, I'm just going to let y'all know this right now. I know you're shocked, but I am never going to be a Sports Illustrated swimsuit model cover. It's not happening.
But like, she's limiting herself right now because she knows she can do it. She just, you know what I'm saying? She just putting
the limitations that you need to place on yourself. There are limitations. Like, look, I'm not going to win a gold medal in the Olympics for gymnastics. That is not going to happen. But
what about the people who say it's all about perspective? You know what I'm saying?
And then there's reality. Yes, no, it is. You can give yourself this much room for what you can possibly do, but just give yourself this much room for what's not going to happen. There you go, right there. Okay, there you go.
You see that muscle flexing? All it takes is a few more workouts, and she'll be
workouts and Sports Illustrated is calling. Right.
Actually, I want to go to this real quick. Funny that you brought that up, because that's something that because like I said, we don't want to just give motivational stuff. We like to give real gems, real things that people can execute on. So what is your opinion on the whole motivational, positivity subject itself? When people say, oh, you just have to believe it, and I don't believe in. Yeah, like what's your real take? Because we mentioned reality, so has a big impact on that take or that theory itself. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, the thing is, okay, you can want something. Wanting something is very different from being willing to do what it takes to get it. And so it's being realistic with yourself, and I think you ask people questions like, this is what I'm interested in. What does it take to get there? And am I willing to invest in that to get there? And why do I want to do it? That's another big thing, is the why. I love talking to people. I love finding out about people, the curiosity. I love sharing people's stories. I love seeing how when you share the story, the impact that happens. Other people will tell you, well, in fact, I used to be over our internship program at a company I worked at, and how many young ladies in particular would come to you and say, I want to be in this business. And I'm like, what's your why? Well, people say I'm pretty. I go, well, that's not a journalist. That is a model. You might modeling and acting maybe, and even with acting, look at all the actors we have. There are actors who are, it takes out, but there are actors who are beautiful, but there are also actors that reflect the real world, right? Yeah, it's who are real people. When you're acting in a role and you're casting somebody, not everybody's that proverbial beautiful model person. It's a real person that you connect to, right? So it's ask yourself, why do you want to do something? I'm like, well, that's the wrong job for you. That's not what we're doing here. And especially with women, if you look at some of the most amazing women in our business, the Oprahs, the Gayle Kings, the Barbara Walters, who was a trailblazer, Jessica Savage, all these, Jessica Savage, she battled the I'm pretty, take me seriously, please, right? But anyway, just all these different women, they weren't the beauty queens. They were real, smart, hard-working women. So it's not about that. It's what can you do that make that your beauty shine. So people, when we say, oh, you can do whatever you want to do, put your mind to it, you're right. If you believe it, you can achieve it. Again, faith without works. And then there's a dose of reality in there. You're just, certain things you're either not going to work that hard to become that, or those things just aren't going to happen. So what do you discover along the way when what you thought or wanted to happen didn't happen? Did you find something better? Did you find something that that you could do and be passionate about? So if you're so limited that you only have one little thing that you can do in life, there's going to be some problems unless you can achieve that. Otherwise, be open to life, like we said. That when you think, oh, if I'm just positive, this will happen. Everything is a series of experiences, especially I think today we're living longer than we ever have before. Your generation's going to live add probably 20, 30 years with medical technology onto what my life expectancy is. Methuselah. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. So the thing is that there's so much more you can do. I think sometimes people, we used to, you went to high school, you went to college, you got married. If you went to college, whatever, you got married at some point, got a job, worked 30 years, retired, and died a couple of years later. That's not happening anymore. And people, I know when they limit themselves, like, oh my gosh, there's this job. I might apply for this job, but I don't know if I should apply. Oh gosh, no, maybe I shouldn't apply. I don't know. What do you think? And I'm like, well, apply first and let them offer it to you. And then we'll get to that step. Because you've talked yourself out of it, and you haven't even gotten an offer yet. In fact, they don't even know who you are yet.
Cart before the horse.
Mm-hmm. So take it a step at a time, and then oh gosh, they offered it to me. Oh my gosh, should I take it? Should I take it? It's like, how about this? If you take it and you hate it, the slavery's gone. You don't have to stay. Just say, hey, gosh, I thank you for the opportunity. 2 weeks later, but you're packing your boxes and moving on out. But it's like, you're not stuck.
Basically, don't be afraid to change your mind.
Right.
You think every decision is final. It's not.
It's not. And you'll have a series of decisions that you'll make throughout your entire life. You may have a series of careers that you make, throughout your entire life. And it's okay if you honestly approach things. But the other, I think, one of the lessons to know is that know that your decisions may have consequences. But the consequences are the greatest lessons as well. Kendra Scott, which every young lady knows. I don't know if you're familiar with Kendra. Okay, if you have a girlfriend, Kendra Scott's you have to buy some at some point. But she's a jeweler. But she's somebody. She said that her because I don't believe she went to college. She said her greatest lessons and her college were found in the 3, 4, 5 businesses that failed. And today she's $1 billion in the stock market.
I understand that, because failure, it forces you to really analyze what happened. Because when you win, it feels good, but a lot of times you kind of move to the next step. Okay, what's next? But when you fail, it's almost kind of like going back to the classroom type dynamic, where as a student, when you get a question wrong, that certain student that is built to succeed, they're going to look at that problem and analyze it and see, where did I mess up? What mistakes did I make? And then it's like pattern recognition. They're going to see next time they start, they're going to start at a better place, because they're going to say, okay, I'm not going to allow this same problem to plague me again. So I'm gonna prepare, like you talking about preparation. I'm gonna prepare in advance for this because I see that this could become an issue in the future.
And isn't it funny how the things that you got wrong are the ones that you remember, like you really remember? I remember when a general manager came into the newsroom once, I was anchoring, and he goes, "Hey, you keep saying joining us now live when we have a guest." He goes, "If they're joining us, I think it is now. If they're joining us now, I think they are live. If they're live, it is now. If they're live, they're joining us." He goes, "Just say so-and-so." Right? So-and-so is the chairman of the board of blah, blah, blah. Because we don't need joining us now live. He goes, "Pick one."
Now, that makes sense. Another perfect example. Because, like I said, it's the small critiques are what you remember. But it also goes into the human consciousness of we naturally remember negative more than we remember positive.
Absolutely.
Like, as throughout the day.
And I had a hate on for that man forever. And then he became the CEO of a corporation that I ended up working for at one point. And I was like, "Oh, hi, remember me?" Yeah.
Luckily, you didn't say anything crazy.
Right. You're exactly right. And that's another lesson is like, the people you meet on the way up are the same people you might meet on the way down. So, and it could flip who's in control and the whole bit, but you just know who.
Just treat everybody with respect.
Yeah, exactly.
And for this, it makes me think about when we talk about the faith without works is dead. The concept itself. I remember I was having I wouldn't call it a debate. I was having a discussion with a healthy discussion with a young man that was a Christian, and we were talking and kind of discussing the concept behind it. And I remember, I don't know how I came up with the analogy from what I was explaining to him, because he was somewhat on the board of it's all in God's hands, which is true, but there is input that you have to put in as well. So what I was telling him, I gave him a perfect, because we both like sports, so I gave him a perfect analogy. I said, from the faith without works is dead concept, if you have two teams, both of them are competing for the championship. They're playing against each other. They both have faith that they can win, but only one of those teams are going to be able to win. They both prayed to God the night before. They both were sincere, authentic as they could be. Why is it that only one of them actually wins the game?
Let me give you a story. My brother was killed by a drunk driver. He was 21 years old. And I remember people would say to me, "Baby, it was just his time. God just called him home." God didn't call him home. A woman had a .16 blood alcohol level and ran into him and killed him. That was not God calling him home. That was a human being who had a .16 and got in a car and took his life. But several weeks later, I got a phone call for a group that wanted me to come speak to their kids who were going to have a senior prom that was coming up, and said, "Talk to them about driving drunk." I talked to them, I left, and I thought, I don't think a single one of them heard me because they're just all kind of giggling and doing their own thing. And then over the weekend, 4 kids, DUI, 4 kids dead. Monday morning, I get a phone call from 2 of the young ladies that were supposed to get in the car and said, "Miss Duncan, thank you for your speech. We were supposed to be in that car." And I turned around, looked at my friend, as drunk as I was, and said, "I want my mom to pick out a dress for my graduation, not a dress for my funeral." And she said, "Oh, your mom and my mom are going to kill us if we need to get a ride." And she goes, "Well, I'd rather them kill us than this person." Yeah. And she goes, and she said, "I don't want to get in the car." And they didn't. She goes, "But thank you because you saved our life." So I realized at that point, God doesn't do it. God gets you through it. God got me through it strong enough to share the message, and my brother would have wanted me to do that. And in his death, he saved I don't know how many lives in the story that I tell.
That's a very interesting insight, and the whole concept of this is very complex because of the fact that, like, I agree as well. What we do, the lessons we learn, like God, let me see. The ability or the power of free will is more powerful than people realize, because because it's you take a lack of accountability. So, and this is based on something that, from what I've understood or what I appear to understand so far, is that when it comes to free will, when people ask questions such as, "Okay, why didn't I get what I dreamed for, what I wished for," in a sense. Well, you have to understand that you're not the only person that exists. So if there is one God, that's the idea that we're going based on. There's one God, one entity. There's billions of people. What you want at some degree directly opposes what this person wants. So both of you guys have prayed to God. Both of you have wills, free will. You both want something from God, but both of you, your wants directly oppose the other. If you say, I want to be the number one talk show host in the world, this person wants to be the number one talk show host in the world as well. So why should your want be elevated over somebody else's? Like, what makes you better than that person? So the free will that we all have, our free will, the reason why, and this is based on my thing. Yeah, it's not just because.
Yeah, it's funny. I have a relative who would always call to borrow money. And then when she didn't have the money, she'd say, well, I'm just going to pray God will take care of it. Now, somehow God always took care of it. I don't know what she was doing, but it was like, I'm like, okay, let me get this straight. Through college, I've been working 3 jobs, and I'm cleaning apartments and working retail and doing everything I can to put stuff together. And you're calling me to borrow money, and you could be working, but you just don't want to work. And I'm like, I don't, well, God's going to take care of it. So I was like, okay.
There's actually a lot of people that think that way, though. And it's amazing how they do manage, because there's some people that, like I said, don't work or they refuse to work. And every answer is similar. God got me, or if God will figure it out. Or if it's God's will, it'll happen.
She's got a PhD. She's smart. She's so smart. I don't get it. I don't understand it. There's something going on there.
Well, I could think she never found out what her passion was, because having she has a lot of passions.
A lot of passions. A lot of passions. It's just
Are they passions or are they hobbies? Even though you would think they could be linked, they're not always linked.
They aren't, but she could get paid very well for some of her like her artwork and things like that. It was just I don't know, but the thing was always looking at me like, well, you just get stuff, and I work for stuff. I work for stuff, but it was a strange divide that we had, and it was like, but and meanwhile, here's the other thing that's interesting. I idolized her. Growing up, I'd look at her and go, if I had an eighth of the talent that she had, if I had an eighth of the athletic abilities she had, if I had an eighth of, and so it was kind of funny. So some people have everything and do very little with it, and some people have very little and do everything with it.
Maximize their potential. Definitely.
You don't have to be great at everything. Just be happy and good at something.
Like I say, you won't be great at everything. Like I say, you just have to put in work. Like I say, find that talent that you do, or that little talent that you have, and go hard as you can. Following off from the previous topic we were just talking about, how much does it bother you when people think that you were just handed things? Like, they don't see the work you put in or the hours you continually put in, like the journalism in particular, because you mentioned that, how a lot of young ladies. Can you speak to that? Because I know the audience, it's a young lady watching right now that she thinks that, I can do that because I'm good looking and can talk.
I'm prettier than her. I'm younger than her. I'm all that type of stuff. I remember one intern walked in my office one day. It's like, hi, I want to talk to you. You're so lucky. I said, okay, we're going to stop with the luck thing, because it wasn't lucky. There are times that, like I said, I was 30 cents away from having a quarter. I didn't have money. I did what I had to do to make ends meet. I would, clean or whatever, babysit, whatever I could. But it doesn't bother me necessarily, but I want people to understand the story. And, Oprah was good with that. Oprah went through a lot of stuff and got there by hook, by crook. And it was, we all have decisions to make, and it may not pay off the way you think it should or you deserve. And sometimes it does. It doesn't, I guess there's where I've gotten to a place where it doesn't bother me, because I know my story. As long as I know my story, I'm good. But, we were back up to another question you had asked earlier about internships and things and your jobs. When I went to my first TV job out of radio, I did not know how to edit my news stories. And I remember I wrote my story, I went out and got it shot, we did the thing, and I wrote my story, had it all ready to go, and I was going to make my deadline. I go up to the editor, and I said, here's my stuff. And she goes, and walked off. And I said, they said that you're the one editing it. And she goes, I applied for your job, and I didn't get it. Edit it yourself. And I was like, but I'm not an editor. I don't know how to edit this. And 2 things happened. One was, I said to myself, I will never be in this position again. I paid, even though I didn't have any money, 30 cents away from having a quarter, I paid a photographer to come in on weekends with me and teach me how to edit. My first Emmy was for editing. I was like, I will never be in that position again. and I loved to edit. I loved to put stuff together. At times, really loved editing the story more so than actually telling the story. I would gather the elements so that it could be, presented in such a way. But I said, I'll never do that again. But another lesson to learn is just because you're at a company she had been at the company for 6 years as an editor, but she applied for the reporting job. She's like, well, I was here first. You've been here for 6 years editing. I was in radio, but I was reporting. I was doing the skill set that they're looking for. So it's know what just because you're at a place for X number, and ask questions. How can I do this? You might have to leave and in my business, to go to a smaller market. There are a lot of people who want to start in Dallas or start in Houston in their hometown, and that's usually not the case. They usually want you to come from someplace smaller where you've learned to do it. Everyone thinks they can do it. Yeah, exactly. And because there's a lot to put together at one time. Being a reporter, it was like, I remember when I first moved to Dallas, I had moved from Austin to Dallas, and this market, WFAA, was like the number one station in the country. And I was like, oh, I can't believe I'm here. But I remember after my interview, I looked in the rearview mirror and said, if I'm just here for one day, I can always put on my resume, WFAA. So, I get there and I just put my stuff down on my desk, and all of a sudden I hear Duncan to the roof. I go, I'm sorry, did y'all call my name? They're like, yeah, to the roof. What's on the roof? Helicopter. Why am I getting in the helicopter? They go, there's a fire. I'm like, okay, how many alarms? Anybody hurt? What kind of building? Where? They're like, don't know. And I thought to myself, I'm going to get fired. I have no information. And so we get up in the helicopter and we finally get over this apartment complex, and they come to me live, and I'm thinking, right? And I said, hey, I go, okay, so probably one of the worst calls that firefighters want to get. You're in a dwelling that has, multi levels of homes, and I'm going to, I go, it looks like they have wood shingles on top of the roof. I know that there are some ordinances in some places across the country where that, I just.
I was like, at that point, it's just observation skill, meaning you're going strictly by what you see.
You think you're in control? That's the problem. You have to be willing to go. I said, there's an ambulance that's been here since we got here, and chances are that means that no one's been hurt. And the great thing about this is the time of day. Most kids are at school, most people are at work, and you see firefighters down there, they're knocking on the doors. So it's the observation.
So you were able to use your previous knowledge that you've accumulated over years in order to kind of paint the picture and tell the story of what's going on.
Deal. When I moved there, I left my anchor job in Austin. Everyone kept saying to me, why would you leave your anchoring job to be a reporter at WFAA? I said, because it's WFAA. And I went there as a lateral move money-wise, but here's the thing that was funny about it. They kept sending me out on all these live shots, and I was like, oh my God, why do they keep sending me out? And then 3 months later, they said, we're doing a pilot for a talk show. And I'm like, well, I don't really do talk show. I'm investigative, spot news. And they go, yeah, but you signed a contract and we want you to do it. And I said, okay. And the reason why I said I didn't do it and I kept fighting it, I was scared. I was like, I can't do talk show. I work with scripts. I work with, anchoring. I had scripts. I could work with scripts. Yeah. I didn't feel comfortable. I'm like, why would they want to listen to me? And what would I say? And I don't know what I'm doing. So I did the pilot, loved it, got the job. And then 3 months after we started Good Morning Texas, they called us in and said, you two are on fire. I mean, y'all are awesome. We want you to also anchor the morning news. So all the people who are telling me to leave, don't leave my anchor job in Austin to go to a reporter job in Dallas. 6 months later, I had two anchor jobs at the station. So again, you never know if you start things with good intentions, and you're open to not following those goals that you had or listening to what other people think is best for you. You make room for what's better for you.
So I want to know, after all we've talked about, I feel like anyone that is intuitive, they already kind of know the answer to this question. But what gives Miss Deborah Duncan energy?
Part of it was I'm born this way. I'm ADHD, right? So my brain is always going. But what feeds my soul is people and the energy of other people. Whether it's a sad story, bad story, good story, everybody has a story to tell. And anybody who's telling a story, there's something to learn from it. Whether somebody's telling you a specific, here's what happened, here's what went down, or if somebody's speaking to you between the lines. What gives me energy is, can I help somebody? And I'm kind of ridiculous with it. I was in a dressing room at Dillard's one year, and I heard this woman crying in the dressing room next to me. And I yelled out, I go, yeah, I know how you feel. This dress doesn't fit me at all. And so she started chuckling, and then she just kept, and I couldn't help myself. I walked next door and I went, So I walked in and go, look at this. And she started laughing. We sat in there and talked forever. She's going through a bad relationship situation. And long story short, I just said to her, if you really want this to work, you're going to have to work at it. I said, therapy is hard. There are some bitter truths that will be put in your face. I've gone through lots of emotional stuff, some family stuff. And so I said, but at least you'll know. And I ran into her a few years after that, and she said, hi, she said, can I show you something? I said, yeah. She showed me a picture of her little girl, and she goes, we got married. She goes, you're right, it was hard. We went through it, but we were committed to each other at the end, and we're married, and you helped me in that dressing room that day. So what gives me energy is the opportunity to meet somebody and learn from them, and the opportunity to meet somebody and help.
That actually goes when you was talking about earlier about how you were so surprised about people calling you and sending you letters about how you've impacted them, and just what gives you energy naturally that is almost therapeutic.
It is there.
Just listening to you speak on television as well as about different stories that you report, there is a level of therapy that's being performed without you knowing, where people just listening.
Who felt insecure about herself, I was never enough of something. I wasn't pretty enough. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't a lot enough. And every time
you weren't real great at anything.
I didn't feel like I was great at it. But other people, how people would look at you and go, oh my gosh, you're great at this, you're great. That was our homecoming queen in a school where I wasn't supposed to be homecoming queen, right? And things like that. And you're like, how did that happen? So I kept questioning myself. Why does somebody think I'm good? Why does somebody keep hiring me?
You don't see the greatness. You don't see the trees from the forest.
You can't see it. And sometimes I think I hope I never see it because it keeps you trying. And then sometimes you just have to say, I did my best. And if my best resulted in something good for somebody else, then my work is done.
Exactly. That means, like I said, it was a lot of gems being dropped on this podcast.
Stop guessing yourself. Stop being your own worst enemy. We hear that phrase all the time. It is so true. So many of us are our own worst enemy.
Conviction is the word. It's gonna be the word of the podcast. Grease. Oh yeah. What's it? John Travolta?
Yeah. John. Grease is the word. Is the word. Whole other generation people.
And a lot of people, they know that, and I think ours was High School Musical or something. The dudes
yeah.
So the last question is, now this one is a kind of a new thing, a new segment that we do now. Specifically for us, we want to know, what are 3 desires that you have that you hope to accomplish personally or professionally, whichever one you choose, over the next 5 years? I know 5 years is going to fly by, but I just want to know, what are your desires? That's a very...
One desire is I do this unprofessionally all the time, and I love it because it's in my wheelhouse of all that we talked about, is to be a life coach or to actually get my master's and do therapy. Mm-hmm. I'd like to do therapy with relationships, and I want to, move people along and help them to realize that the most powerful person in their life is really them. It's like, what are you doing that keeps you stuck, and how do we get you unstuck? I want to write and finish a book about, connection and all these experiences that I've had, the little things along the way that encourage you to keep going. When I graduated from school, I kept questioning myself. I said, did I make a mistake? I was getting ready to graduate. I said, did I make a mistake? Did I make a mistake? Should I go take my MCAT and go to? I gotta do that. And
what did you major in school?
Start out with biology and then radio, television, film. And so I kept thinking, did I make a mistake? Did I make a mistake? I was reading my book for the very last exam I was going to take, and it started raining, and I stopped in a little ice cream shop, and I literally took 2 dimes out of my shoes because I didn't have enough money, and I took them out of my penny loafers. I'd always keep dimes in there. Mm-hmm. And I bought a little ice cream cone. I sat down. I was reading a book by Walter Cronkite, and I got to the very end. I went, okay, please, dear God, please tell me I did not make a mistake in what I majored in, because this was it. All right, you're graduating. That was it. And as I closed my book, I looked up, and sitting at the table next to me was Walter Cronkite and his daughter.
So you're reading?
I was reading his book, which my last final was going to be on. And I walked over and I said, oh my God. I said, I just got through reading. I just got through asking myself, did I make a mistake? And he started laughing. He said, no, you didn't. there are no mistakes when you're learning in life. And so he signed my book, and
I can't say I need help with my finals. I'm about to take I'm about to take a test on you.
walked him into the classroom and went, do I even need to take my final? Okay, drop the mic right now. Here's Walter Cronkite, right? But yeah, so I'd like to finish a book. And then I look forward to just watching my son blossom, whatever it is that he wants to do. I hope that I'm a part of his life in that as well.
So those are three very powerful desires, particularly for the first two.
To still help others, but in a different way.
Another part of this segment, this one is more about, because we love to be able to follow up as well with people. That's why we try to give desires that. Yeah, I will. We definitely will. We'll come broadcast it, because we do interviews 5 years. So again, like I said, it's not no rush, but we would love to get, let's say, an actionable steps that you plan to take, especially given that you said want to go back to school. Sounds like for therapy.
You're right about that, because I had in my head that I was going to be Deborah Duncan in 3D, so it'd be Dr. Deborah Duncan, and I was so stuck on that title, in 3D. I was like, oh yeah, this is good. But getting a PhD is like it's you got to buckle down on that, and I'm so many things that I'm doing that I would have to become selfish, and I'd have to say yeah. But in fact, the show that we just did today, one of my great friends, she worked with me at Channel 11. She filled in for me when I had my son. She left the business to get her degree, and that's what she does. Is she's a therapist.
So and you're actually, and again, we're not making any concrete claims here, but you were actually open to the idea potentially in the future of taking a sabbatical.
Yeah, either that or retiring, and that's my second job. Yeah. So, but she said something to me. She goes, you don't have to get off this PhD thing. There's other things you can do, right? And work in a practice and be accredited to give therapy. And then for the book, I taught last semester, and my co-professor, who I absolutely adore, is the smartest man in the world. I love this guy because talking about actionable, he went from delivering cement at a part-time job. He's living in Cut and Shoot, Texas, to had dropped out of high school, getting his GED, taking his ACT, SATs, ends up in Rice, and has 4 PhDs. So
I feel as though at some point, when you've had years of experience dealing with people, I feel as though at some point it's a skill set rather than an indoctrination, meaning that just because you don't have a PhD in psychology, if you've been dealing with prisoners and war veterans for 30 years, or you've been doing reports on families with traumatic past, it's like at some point the material, regardless. And then there's a reality part. It's like coding. At some point, I know C++, I know Python, and like it doesn't matter what school I went to.
Look, you don't need to teach the business class. You need to get a PhD first before you come teach the business. Right?
Like at some point, I know business, so it's like I've done this.
Yeah, but there are requirements, and so but there are different ways to do it. So you could be a life coach, and a life coach means that you have some guidelines when you're in a good life coach program. There are guidelines, but you're right. You don't have to do the whole part of the PhD. And PhDs means that you can do different things, right? Yeah. I just want to deal with you one-on-one and get you on your way. So maybe it's a life coach thing. But then the professor I was talking about, he's the one that called me and said, okay, you need to do your book. We're going to sit down in a couple of weeks and we're going to outline it. And he means it. So because, part of mine, when you have a lot of things that you do, is the procrastination part. And procrastination is no one's friend, right? So when you texted and it's like, well, would you come on the podcast? I'm like, sure. And you're like, when? I was like, okay, I'll answer later. But I said, you know what? No, I'm going to answer right now. Because if I answer later, you're going to find yourself at the bottom of the feed somewhere. And like in June, you'll be going, so did you think you can come on the podcast? Yeah. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. So let's make it happen now. But,
I'm glad you did. I was actually surprised as well. Because like I knew you were very busy. So I figured it was going to be one of those situations where I had to follow up maybe a few weeks later. And, like to kind of reconfirm. Yeah.
Discovers the African American journalist, and they're like, we need you at our program. We're available other times of the year too, people.
Oh, definitely. Like I said, we're down. I'm down to come on whenever you guys, or whenever we have something that's worthy to be talked about on the news. Like I'm definitely would love the opportunity. Oh yes, man. The Juneteenth T-shirts we have. So I'm gonna make this the last final question. Final, yeah. Cause like it's been over an hour. I've been watching it, Tom. So, are there any regrets that you have? Doesn't have to be traumatically deep, but are there any regrets that you have?
I wouldn't say regrets as much as maybe I wonder, right? So when I ended up doing the Deborah Duncan show, what happened was I had gone to a network that thought Oprah was not going to re-sign. So they had me in what you call a syndication mode, where if Oprah had not re-signed, then I would be considered to replace that spot, not replace her, but replace that time slot as their syndication talk show. And so it was a decision between going with them and then going with 20th Century Fox, who I interviewed for something completely different. And what they were looking at was a possible sitcom. Because when I went into that interview, it was a whole different atmosphere and stuff. And we just ended up having a comedy fest. And they're like, you're funny. Yeah.
You do seem that you would be a fitting character on a sitcom.
Yeah, so it was funny, but they're like, so they called my agent, and she had one phone to one ear with one group and one phone to the other with the other group, and she's like, "What do you want?" And I was like, The problem with the sitcom situation was they didn't have a sitcom yet. They're like, we have to write something with you in mind or plug you into something. So I was in a holding pattern, and the other person who was in the holding pattern was Sofia Vergara. And they pay you to be the host, but you're not working. They pay you not to work, basically, until they can find the right thing. Sofia Vergara is one of the highest paid TV personalities today for Modern Family.
So you looked at it as though I'm probably not going to beat her out of this position.
No, because her position was I would have been doing something completely different.
We're going to be together.
It was either I do a talk show right now, or I go with the other company and be in a holding pattern to do a sitcom. Yeah. When I say she was there, no, she's just an example of what holding patterns are. She was in a holding pattern for years, I think, and then they finally found something they could cast her in, and she's like, it was wildly successful at it, right? Yeah. So I could have done the same thing that she did, but there's no guarantees I would have hit on a sitcom. They just would have paid me to sit still. Or I could have gone with the talk show, which is what I did, which did not go into syndication because Oprah decided to resign that last time.
Wait, so with them paying you to sit still, are they paying you to not do anything else? Okay.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And I was like, no, I want to hit the ground running. Yeah, I want to hit the ground running right now. And I couldn't work for both companies. And so, it was both of them were taking a chance. And it's just, I chose that one. I do kind of wonder if I had chosen the other one, what would have happened? Who knows? I have no idea.
Yeah, that's the thing. You've heard of Gary Vee? Gary Vee, he's a serial entrepreneur.
See, in my line of business as a journalist, when you say cereal, I go, wait, cereal what? Oh, yeah, okay, no, right, yeah.
So like with him, he kind of spoke to that exact statement you just made, where he said that it's no point in wondering because you'll never know. You'll never be able to choose two different paths at one time. So it's like at some point you have to. It's like it kind of takes away. Of course, this is not your issue, but some people are very hesitant to make decisions because they wonder which is the better decision. The problem is, as long as they're both good decisions, you'll never know which one was the better. So just go full force.
I could take this job, but oh my God, I don't know if I should apply for it or not. Well, why don't you apply and get it offered to you before you do right? But yeah,
you're never going to know the alternative anyway.
Yeah, and so to answer your question, I have gone. I wonder what that would have been like, but I don't have any regrets.
And you actually, to your credit, you prefaced it by saying you don't have a regret. So even though you never heard of Gary Vee and his statement, you already believe that subconsciously. It wasn't a regret because it was nothing you could do about it. You chose, you made up your mind, and you
not do anything, right? Do something. It's going to take you on a path, whether you take that road or that road. Just make sure your road is you stay on the road. Put it that way. But even when I say that, though, sometimes taking that detour is where you learn your most valuable lessons.
Like I said, and also have fun as well. Taking those detours. And like I said, the word is adaptability. Make sure you're able to be fluid like water or like oil or something, Something that you're able to, because a lot of obstacles are going to come your way. And if you're too rigid, you don't want to be the example she gave about the young lady who all she knew was whatever question she had on her note card and not really paying attention, adapting, and listening to what's going on around them. So the different things that come up in life, it's really about observing and listening. Like, don't just be so narrow-minded where you focus, I got to do it. Because even with the steps that she gave, don't say, okay, step one, I have to do this. Step two, I have to do. All of these are just guidelines but no one's forcing you verbatim. Everyone's journey is going to be a little bit different. So if you're on step 2 and some opportunity in your mind appears out of nowhere, be willing to take advantage. And then also going to our last point, because you're not going to know what the alternative is, don't procrastinate or don't not make a decision because you're overwhelming yourself with the possibilities. Because at the end of the day, you got to choose one route, or you could choose both if it's possible, but go as hard as you can in whatever you choose and don't look back.
Think about all the things that could not have happened if somebody said, but that doesn't make sense. We wouldn't have planes in the sky. We wouldn't have cars on the road. We wouldn't have podcasts with cell phones.
We wouldn't have a cell phone. We wouldn't have this mic right here to talk into it, the volume, all of that.
Trust me, it's a wheel. Look how it works.
And everybody who innovated appeared crazy in the beginning. So don't be afraid to appear crazy, for sure. And we appreciate y'all for tapping in with us. I want y'all to make sure y'all please like, comment, and subscribe on this video. Desire is energy. We say desire is the fire that helps to inspire. So hopefully you've gotten some real gems. Don't just be inspired, but be about it as well.
And ask yourself, what can I do to make it a great day?
From Great Day Houston herself, let's get it.